surprise. This, and that's the, the interesting thing with COVID. You have a physical evidence. You have it right there. People are dying. You got it. There's your smoking gun. The climate change smoking gun is there. It's just a little harder to see. It still requires an acceptance of science. I don't need to accept science to know that grandpa's dying or dead. I don't need science to know that. I do need science to still know that increased temperatures, wildfires, hurricanes, diseases moving. There's malaria in southern Italy now that hasn't been there in decades. This is caused by climate change. It's still easy to say, those scientists, I don't trust them. The Rand Corporation, of all people, this is basically a Defense Department think tank, but they did a study. It's called Truth Decay, and they looked at the quality of public and political discourse in this country. And I would venture it's similar for Canada, and just saying it is so degraded. And why is that, or what are we seeing? And what they found was we debate facts, which is astonishing. This one I find interesting and very helpful to think through. We blur opinion and fact. And so whenever I hear a news story, I'm very careful to watch for that. How much are they giving me news and how much are they giving me opinion? We are distrusting previously trusted sources of information, fake news. We've never seen anything like this. We've seen other periods of division like this, but not to this extent. And they conclude by saying, this is the existential crisis of our time. If we don't solve this, we can solve nothing else. How can you solve climate change if you can't even agree it's happening? And so I find that quite powerful, both for its content and for the source. This is, it's Rand. It's very interesting that they did this, and they see this as the great challenge before us. And let's, also recognize social media is doing a lot of it to us, and the extent to which social media allows it's a knife that cuts two ways. Social media has allowed previously marginalized voices to speak. This is true, but it has also allowed disruptive voices to have outside influence in our public and political discourse, and that's the frustrating danger of this, is that there are people who actually do not have our interests in mind when they are, using social media to sow division.
I'm fascinated by the correlation, whether it's climate change or whether it's COVID-19. It's a strategy.
And you can go back to cigarettes. Naomi Oreskes wrote this wonderful book, Merchants of Doubt, and it's the same tactics, same people, and said cigarettes are good for you, don't ban them, that are at play in this one as well, and some of the same characters too.
What's your favorite book? What's your current favorite book?
Well, I just read The Overstory by Powers. It's beautifully written. It's about our relationship with trees. It's a novel. Very cleverly written, beautifully written novel. And by the end of it, you will think differently about forests and trees. I found it quite interesting.
How about your books? Do you have a favorite? Or is it like picking one of your favorite kids?
Well, How Culture Shapes the Climate Change Debate, I like, because it communicates something in a way that people are actually grasping, and I like that. But I'm also partial of my memoir on house building. I think that's important to me.
Is that the Builder's Apprentice?
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading it.
Thank you.
What struck you about that time in your life?
That I had the nerve to do it. I don't know where it came from, but I look back, I think that was pretty gutsy to do that. It's interesting. The man that I built the really big house for, the 29,000 square foot house for, but he's obviously very wealthy, and we've stayed in touch. He said something to me one time that I thought was quite interesting. He said, Andy, when you went back to grad school, you were all in, like in the card game format. You put all your chips in. You just went for it, all in. And I thought about that. I didn't realize I was doing that, but I did the same thing when I went into carpentry. I was all in. I just quit, turned down graduate school. I was all in. And I still marvel at that I have the nerve to do it, and the extent to which I've learned from that and still use it today. I love working with my hands, doing carpentry work. I just love it.
I like your Mark Twain quote about the two most important days of your life. One is when you're born, and the other is when you find out what your passion is.
Well, it's you find out why. That is, and I think that changes over time too.
Has your passion changed?
Yeah, it's constantly changing. I've become much more critical of what we're teaching in business schools. I've become more critical of the rules of academia, what we value, the extent to which we stand back from society, don't engage as much as we should. I've recently become, I don't know where this is going to go, but efforts to try and change things on the global institutional scale, boy, maybe you can have a little tiny impact. And I'm just thinking more and more that changes in the local. How do I bring that into my life more? How do we think more about the local, about connecting, about local resilience? I did a case study, and it was really fascinating to me. I don't know if the case will be used much. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But it's on a local currency in the Berkshires in Massachusetts called Berkshires. And it is not just intended to be a currency full stop. It's part of a broader initiative by this group called the Schumacher Center to create a local resilient economy. So the beauty of a local currency is the money stays local. And that's the whole point. You know, you don't use it as a Walmart, you use it with local businesses. And so we want to keep money local. But then beyond that, how do we build the local business base so that we import less and produce more? So we don't necessarily need to make cars. We can't make cars, but can we produce our own local produce? Can we produce our own fabric? Can we produce our own sweaters, our own pottery? What can we do locally to support local businesses to create an integral supporting economy? I find this fascinating. And I think that really is how community is built. It's not built from Washington or Ottawa. It's built from Vancouver or Ann Arbor or the Berkshires.
I'm not sure what you're finding at your home now, but certainly where we are, you can see all of the different communities and the little pockets coming together, doing things for each other, helping elderly, and pitching in, which is reassuring.
And you know what? What you're describing is something that can transcend the political partisanship. I mean, the conservative side of the aisle has been saying this for years. Solutions don't come from federal policy. Solutions come from your local community. And at the end of the day, I'd much rather have people here in my neighborhood looking out for me than a federal agency. How do we foster that community spirit? You asked before, what would I like to see change? This is it.
Yeah.
And so then the question is, how do we make sure that sticks when this is done and not just go back to business as usual? I'll be curious. And I keep saying when this is done, I don't know, who knows it's ever done. But how many people are going to change professions after this? How many people are looking at their job right now and going, this is meaningless. What am I doing? Some will do it out of frustration. I fear that many may leave the medical profession after this, just saying this was awful and people didn't support us, so screw that, I'm out of here. But others are getting a good glimpse of what really matters right now. And I hope that sticks. I really do.
I'm just curious about how much things have changed. We aren't driving as much as we used to. We aren't spending money on the things that we used to. Everything's changed. And oil tankers are in ports right around the world with no place to put their oil. And the planet may not be in the same position that it was 15 million years ago, but it's definitely breathing a little easier.
And people in, for example, Beijing are looking at blue skies for the first time. And hopefully they'll say, when the skies start to get dirty again, they'll say, wait a minute, why can't we have those blue skies back? And a lot of people are walking now. And you see Manhattan in New York City, Mayor de Blasio has closed 40 miles of streets to turn them into pedestrian zones so people can social distance. Now, if they get used to that, maybe they'll say, maybe we don't have to have our entire city be car habitat. And maybe we can make more walkable areas, more pedestrian malls, into our urban infrastructure. And the sense of community, of awareness that we do rely on each other. How does that stick? But again, it won't stick by itself. It will take concerted effort because we are a species that does not like change. We're a species that has inertia. And like a rubber band, we will, without concerted effort, we will snap back to where we were before. With certainty, I can say that. Unless there's concerted effort to say, let's acknowledge what the problem is. Let's acknowledge these changes. Let's say what we want to keep and keep it. And that's not going to be easy because we're all familiar. We're all going to want our investment accounts to be right back where they were before. We're all going to want to take that long vacation that got postponed. Whether anyone will get on a cruise ship again, I don't know.
Yeah. Difficult to know what to expect. Again, when we first met, your focus was and still is on the social, political, and management issues of our time.
And business has to be part of the solutions, but we need to rethink business. I taught a course this past winter a brand new course offering. And a couple of points about it. One is it was a heck of a lot of work. And quite frankly, the incentives academically aren't there to do it, because I just have to teach my course load, and all they care is, did you teach a course load? Yeah. So a new course prep is a lot of work, but I did it anyway. I did it for my own personal value. I think it's important. And so that's point one. But point two is the topic was business in democracy, advocacy, nice. Lobbying, and the public interest. And it really was looking at the extent to which corporations have sort of dominated government and the extent to which people think government has no role in the market. And how do we think not about more or less government, but the right kind of government? And that's the conversation to have. A lot of people think, well, just government is bad. Well, no, the markets don't work without government. So how do we think about business engaging with government in a way that's some sense of the public interest in mind? Now, it's a brand new course, and usually new courses do okay, but it's like buying a first-year model car. You wait for the car dealer, the company to work the bugs out. I had 70 students. And
it's a big class.
It's a big class. The student demand was strong. And students told me that they were frustrated that there wasn't enough coverage of the role of business in the market within the business school. And I would also add that course was cross-listed with business school and the public policy school. So I was able to bring both communities together to say, okay, you guys got to work together going forward. How do we rethink those norms? It's a drop in the ocean. I mean, I'm one course, many business students out there, and they're going to go into a system that says you lobby the government to game for your own self-interest. But it's a piece of trying to pick at the armor and say, let's change the institutions of business. There are courses out there that are starting to emerge, are starting to question. In fact, there's a course at the Harvard Business School by one of my former advisors, Rebecca Henderson, called Reimagining Capitalism. And she started it thinking it was just going to be a small elective, and it just exploded. The students are eating it up. And it's not, there's a knee-jerk reaction in this country, maybe less so in Canada. Oh, you're talking socialism. Oh, the big S word. It's a four-letter word. But it's not. It's not. It's just saying capitalism is a set of institutions designed by human beings in the service of human beings, and sometimes it needs to be amended. It's in need of amendment right now. To my mind, the two great failures that capitalism seems either unable or unwilling to address are in the natural environment, climate change, and in the social environment, income inequality. Income inequality is at staggering levels in this country right now. And if you think about the COVID crisis, that has exposed this. Before the COVID crisis, there was a stat. It came out from the federal government that 40% of Americans could not pull together $400 in an emergency. Well, we're in that emergency. So there are at least 40% of Americans are in very dire straits financially. So almost half of Americans are in a very dangerous spot. Now, the answer cannot be, well, open the economy and you can risk your life in order to put food on the table. That's not the answer either. That's why the stimulus money came out, because people realized, holy smokes, we could have a serious problem here. You could have a social breakdown. And Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate in economics, has been writing about this for years, saying income inequality is so dangerous in our society. Well, that danger is here. And so there's another example of how can we define the nature of the problem such that the solution follows like a prescription to an illness. And income inequality is an extremely serious failure of capitalism that needs to be corrected. I mean, I find it ironic and I get quite cynical when all this praise for people on the front line, the essential workers, if they were really that essential, pay them a living wage. For goodness sake, pay them fairly. And we don't even do that. I mean, Jeff Bezos' fortune went up by over $20 billion, and he still won't pay sick time to his employees at Amazon. Something's amiss.
Yeah. So what happens to those that are vulnerable and marginalized?
I don't know. Do they resort to violence? I mean, if you had nothing and needed to put food on the table for your family, what would you do? That's a scary question if you really take it seriously, because I think most people would say, I would do what I have to do.
I was struck by an article that Rebecca Solnit wrote when she was visiting in San Francisco during the fires, and she recognized in one of the many power outages how many people had been displaced because of those fires, never going home. not having a home to go to, not having the money to pay the rent for the home that they used to live in, and now living from their cars. And it's interesting how quickly your life can change in a crisis.
It all circles around, to my mind,